We are now 26 days away from LSU football, so let's talk about the Tigers right here for a few minutes, Musso. LSU still a 3-point favorite in the season opener against Florida State. And yesterday, Mike Denbrock addressed the media. Again, I will commend Brian Kelly here at the start of his tenure as LSU head coach. He's been really transparent with the media. I feel like we haven't talked to too many coordinators the last 5, really like 10 years. But we didn't really get to all the stuff that Denbrock said yesterday because the AP rankings came out and we both had thoughts. So I thought we'd discuss a little bit of what Denbrock said yesterday here today. And a whole lot stood out to me. But to start the segment, I will ask you, Musso, did anything that LSU's offensive coordinator really stick out to you yesterday that he said?
Offensive line, I mean, he told you it was in flux. That speaks pretty loudly. I mean, if your OC is going to sit there and tell you, yeah, I mean, it's in flux. I mean, you got Garrett Dellinger playing center. I mean, I think the only thing you know for sure is that Will Campbell's going to start at left tackle. And that goes back to even spring. I mean, Brian Kelly said it during spring that, yeah, it's starting to come along a little bit there, and it really happened when Will Campbell started playing left tackle. So that's going to happen. Everything else, to use Mike Denbrock's words, in flux. You don't know who's going to play center. I don't really think you know who's going to play on the rest of the interior, either at guard or at either guard spot. And Miles Frazier can potentially play tackle, but they've played him a lot at guard. You've seen Anthony Bradford at tackle, which to a lot of people would be music to your ears, right?
Finally.
Because this is now the second straight coaching staff, second straight that you've heard about the potential for Anthony Bradford, and it's just never really come to fruition. So while that can be exciting to hear, I think you still have that doubt. Okay, well, I've seen this story before in a sense, right? We've heard all the preseason hype for Anthony Bradford every single year. It's time for him to go out there and prove it. They have numbers along the offensive line, but you have to find that right combination. And it feels like center, with all due respect to Liam Shanahan last year, he did an admirable job, but he was limited, and it was a weakness for LSU on the offensive line. And right now, this is day 6 practice 6 or 7 for LSU,
7, yeah,
somewhere along there. And you seem very unsettled at center, which is unsettling for media, unsettling for fans, because that could be a weak spot again for LSU going into 2022.
It could be, but just based on what you said with Shanahan being in place last year and this new coaching staff putting such an emphasis on this position, I would think it's going to be an upgrade. We'll see what Charles Turner specifically can do, but that phrase in flux, we've heard a lot throughout the offseason, and I feel like we could hear it throughout the season a lot too. But I do like that Kelly and Brad Davis are trying to be really versatile. They're trying to teach these guys how to play a lot of different positions along the offensive line, and we've already kind of seen a lot of change because they look different at yesterday's practice, at least the first 5, compared to the first day of practice, because everyone that was there at the last practice said that near the beginning of that 30-minute viewing period when the media can observe what's going on, LSU used a combination of Will Campbell, Tremont Short, somebody who I think has a great chance to start, Garrett Dellinger at center, right guard Miles Frazier, and right tackle Anthony Bradford, who you were just talking about. And this was different from the first day of practice when we saw a different group out there. They had left to right Charles Turner, Cardel Thomas, Cam Wire on the offensive line there instead of those other guys. So it has been in flux for a while, and I'm sure it will continue to be in flux.
You had Fitzgerald West repping at center as well. I mean, Fitzgerald West is a true freshman, and that's all well and good, but the part that I think is concerning about that is he was a defensive lineman in high school, and now you have him repping at center. Like, that just shows you how unsettled they are at that position especially, and that's pretty darn important position on the offensive line, yeah?
Got to get creative with that group. That's something else that he said all offseason, so I would not be surprised to see them continue to be creative. And Emery Jones, I think, is an interesting wild card in all this. I'm always really careful with freshman offensive linemen because I think that's a big jump to make from, playing high school football to playing college football on the line of scrimmage. But they've kind of given him a lot of props, and they said that he has a lot of traits that they're looking for in an offensive lineman. So I would think Emery Jones eventually will find his way onto the field.
Yeah, I really think maybe potentially if he was an early enrollee and he was here in spring, that you could be even hearing even more about him. Because Brian Kelly, when he was asked about guys that stuck out who weren't in spring, Emery Jones was one of the first names he mentioned. I mean, so he's definitely turning heads out there for sure.
And Cardel Thomas is still on the team. A lot of people, including Lars in the chat, have been disappointed with him at LSU so far, but I'm interested to see what he can do. He had so much hype coming in, and he's been through so much change throughout his time at LSU, and he will get a chance too. Maybe he needs to learn how to do some different things, and he's not factoring in very much right now, but I have not given up on Cardel Thomas. Have you?
I wouldn't say I've given up on him. I don't really know Mario. I haven't seen enough of him to know to believe or not. I mean, it's one of those things where the guy has experience playing, but not a lot. The sample size is very small. Everybody remembers the hype coming out of Southern Lab. I mean, he was the guy who, was such a great recruiter for LSU in that class, guaranteed a national championship in his time at LSU, which, I mean, ultimately technically happened. But
he guaranteed that they would never lose to Alabama, too.
Yeah, well,
and then they beat them the first year. So that was true for 1 year.
That's just never a guarantee you should ever make. But I don't know. I think he's just a guy who is involved in a kind of a uncertain mess, if you want to call it that, along the offensive line for LSU right now. They have to figure it out, and they've got 3 weeks to do it.
Yeah, but still a guy that has been on campus forever. Somebody who has not been on campus that long is Noah Kane, but it looks like he can play a big hand in LSU's running back rotation. Maybe maybe be the RB1, putting that in quotes, going into the season, because Mike Denbrock has been really high on him. And we haven't talked too much about the departure of Bradford, but he's no longer on the team, so there will be reps to be had there at running back. And I think just kind of in terms of playing in meaningful games and having the team rely on him week to week, because that's what happened with Kane while he was at Penn State. He's a little bit more experienced than Emery. I think Emery's a whole lot more explosive, though. He has a higher ceiling, but those two guys are going to take most of the carries for LSU this season. It's clear.
It's interesting you mentioned the explosiveness of John Emery, because Noah Kane was asked on Friday when he spoke to the media about his explosiveness, about his style as a running back, and he said that he believes he kind of got stuck with the moniker of being more of a power back just because of the way he was used at Penn State. But he's got plenty of explosion. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. I think you have a really dynamic player in Noah Kane, and that could be a really awesome 1-2 punch for LSU. You also have Armani Goodwin, who many people are excited about the speed, but you didn't really get to see much of it last year because of injuries and things of that nature. Josh Williams as well. Brian Kelly has mentioned that all of them are going to play. Running back by committee is something we're all very familiar with at LSU, but what we're also familiar with is when you have running back by committee, one of the guys steps up and is the bell cow. Who is that going to be? I think we all assume it's John Emery. Wait and see how it plays out.
Was Goodwin the guy that jumped over a guy, or was that your boy that left from Ohio? I feel like it was Armani Goodwin, but he will need to display a little bit more of that to get more carries, I would think.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But Noah Kane had 443 rushing yards as a freshman at Penn State on 84 carries. Got hurt in 2020 during the COVID year, but then in 2021, 106 attempts, 350 yards to go with 4 touchdowns. And receiving the ball, 2021, he had 114 receiving yards on 19 catches. So maybe they do get him a little bit more involved in the passing game, but traditionally he's been running between the tackles, and he was really good at Penn State in those 3 years. One last note here on LSU football before we break and go out to Vegas to talk to Raphael. Malik Neighbors apparently moving to the slot. Don't have too many updates from today's practice, at least on Twitter, at least not at this time. But Brody Miller did tweet out a couple hours ago, around 12:30, that Malik Neighbors is now in the slot. And this is a decision that the staff made. And apparently the staff said that they're working on speed and reading coverages with Malik Neighbors. And they think it'll make him a mismatch in the middle. I think this is really interesting. Again, the staff trying to get creative. They can do that at this time of year. And with all the bodies that LSU has at wide receiver, I think this could end up being a pretty good move.
No, it could be, for sure. I mean, I think you have a lot of options there. I think Jeray Jenkins is somebody that maybe you could see there in the slot. You saw Jack Besh kind of play both inside and out at receiver last year. The one thing you know for sure is that Kayshawn will be split wide and will make life miserable for defenses.